नहीं हो पा रही थी एक्चुअली, मुझे आवाज आ रही थी
अच्छा,
तुम्हारी, बट आई वाज unable to join, that's why I couldn't. Now I am
we are live.
here.
We are live. We are live.
Okay. Hello, ma'am.
Hello.
Good evening, dear participants and partakers. I'm delighted to open the second week of International Faculty Development Program, Season 3, on Literature, Society and Thoughts, an effort towards sustainable development, organized by the Department of Languages under the aegis of Human Resource Development Cell, Integral University. I'm humbled to pronounce the successful closing of week one, the credit of which is solely corresponded to our illustrious speakers across the disciplines and nations. Professor Nishi Pandey, Professor Vishal Gupta, Professor Alka Singh, Professor Savita Kaushal, Professor Dev Dalal Holder, and Professor Murli Manohar. Our noted speakers exceptionally justified the interaction of sustainability in literary scholarship by reflecting on the capacity of gender, management, education, and literature by running interference for sustenance and sustainability.
I don't know whether you can hear me.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, because I think there is some glitch.
Yeah, Vanya,
Okay,
your
okay.
voice is not coming. You are not audible to us.
Achha, just a second. Am I audible now?
Yes, you are now.
Please.
Okay, okay. I'll again reintroduce. Good evening, dear participants and partakers. I'm delighted to open the second week of International Faculty Development Program, Season 3, on Literature, Society and Thoughts, an effort towards sustainable development, organized by the Department of Languages under the aegis of Human Resource Development Cell, Integral University. I'm humbled to pronounce the successful closing of week one, the credit of which is solely corresponded to our illustrious speakers across the disciplines and nations. Professor Nishi Pandey, Professor Vishal Gupta, Professor Alka Singh, Professor Savita Kaushal, Professor
Again, I cannot hear anything, but I don't know whether it's because of me. Okay, right.
Once again, there is a glitch in the
Yeah.
voice. Vanya, please try to be connected properly. Vanya, are you there?
Yes, 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 yeah. Am I audible now?
Yeah, please. Yes, yes, you are
Oh,
audible now. Please start.
okay. Okay. I'm certain that the week two will carry forward the debate, discussion, and dissection on the pivotal issue of the role of literature, society, and thoughts in addressing the issue of climate change with equal decisiveness and discretion. Hereby, I'm pleased to introduce our eminent speaker of the day, Professor Elisabetta Marino from University of Rome, Tor Vergata. Ma'am is an associate professor of English literature. She is the author of four monographs, a volume on the figure of Tamerlane in British and American literature, an introduction to British Bangladeshi literature, a study on the relationship between Mary Shelley and Italy, an analysis of the romantic dramas on a mythological subject. In 2006, Ma'am published the first Italian translation of poems by Maria Mazziotto Gillan. Between 2000
Vanya, once again, the same glitch is here. Your voice is not audible.
just a second. Am I audible now, ma'am?
Yes,
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 you are.
you're audible.
Okay. I'm so sorry for the technical glitches, dear participants and our distinguished guests. Please excuse me for today. Once again, I'll introduce our illustrious speaker for the day, Professor Elisabetta Marino from University of Rome, Tor Vergata. Ma'am is the Associate Professor of English. She is the author of 4 monographs, a volume on the figure of Tamerlane in British and American literature, an introduction to British Bangladeshi literature, a study on the relationship between Mary Shelley and Italy, an analysis of the romantic dramas on a mythological subject. In 2006, Ma'am published the first Italian translation of poems by Maria Mazziotto Ghilan. Between 2001 and 2023, Ma'am has edited and co-edited 12 collections of essays, 3 more are forthcoming, and a special forum of Journal of Transnational American Studies.
Again, the same problem. Vanya, you just you have introduced ma'am, and now you can start the session for ma'am to speak to start with her lecture.
Okay.
Ma'am, I would
Okay.
request you now to go to further go through your session. You start your session and please go ahead. It's my humble
Okay,
request to you.
I'm so sorry for the glitches, ma'am. Please, the session is
No
all
problem,
yours.
no issue.
No
It's a
problem.
technical glitch. It's a technical glitch. No problem, Vanya. It's
No
okay.
problem whatsoever. So, good evening to you, good morning to Italy, and I'm really, really happy to be here with you and grateful for the kind invitation. So, this seminar I think has been very important for all the participants because it poses us questions, and questions are very important to clarify and find out solutions for a better living. So, when I was asked by the organizers, whom I kindly thank again, what the topic of my talk would be, I thought of delving into a subject that is dramatically present now in our daily life. Even though the pandemic is hopefully the pandemic will be gone or is gone in most of the countries of the world, it is a memory that we all have. It has changed our life for the past 3 years and a half. It has forced us to reinvent our life, reinvent our spaces. Even the connection with other human beings has changed dramatically. And I see it with my students, for example. They find it difficult now to socialize because they have been so much accustomed to an interaction through videos or through the internet that they now find it quite challenging to communicate face to face. So I decided to speak about pandemics, literary pandemics, because this topic has been the object of several works in English and American literature in the past. And if we had been probably more careful in reading texts and in focusing our mind on the message, the powerful message that these writers wanted to convey to their readership, probably we would not be in the situation that we are now, and we would have not found ourselves in the situation we had to grapple with. So, literary pandemics, immediately we can think of Daniel Defoe and his Journal of the Plague Year, which incidentally was translated again and again in Italy and republished during the pandemic. We can think of Jack London in America with the Scarlet Plague. This idea of a mankind, a humanity that, given a pandemic, goes backward, somehow forgets all the progresses that mankind had made throughout the centuries. But what I would like to focus my attention on with you is a very pivotal, seminal work by Mary Shelley, who is my most favorite writer, and I think you all know that. And this novel, because I'm talking about a novel, is The Last Man. The Last Man is a novel that she published in 1826 after a sojourn in Italy. So it is reminiscent of the Italian landscape and everything that she learned in Italy. And Italy gave her the possibility to ponder on actual times, on the crisis that lurked behind the beautiful facade of success, of progress, of colonialism, which was beginning to become dramatically present in everyday life at the time when Mary Shelley was concocting the novel. So, I will talk about The Last Man as the most important literary pandemic. And to give you another example of the importance of this text, I can tell you that during the pandemic, it was republished and translated and retranslated 6 times in the time span of 3 years. So the reading public had the possibility to read Dick's text and find striking reminiscences, striking resemblances to the life that we all had to live during the past 3-4 years. So I will first of all tell you a little bit about the novel, how the novel was born, and the normal, the standard way in which this novel is interpreted by most scholars and critics. Then I will allow you to see that this novel actually presents a very powerful message for the future, because it is a novel set in the future. It is actually set in 2070, 2100. So, I mean, it's 2100. So it's a novel in the future, even if compared to nowadays. So then I will let you know how this text, which apparently is an apocalyptic text, and it has been interpreted as such by many scholars, it is not. It is just a cautionary tale. It is a powerful and strong warning signal that we should be very careful to. Now, let's talk about the novel in itself. So, this novel was published, as I told you, in 1826, after the death of both Percy Shelley and Lord Byron. So, The Last Man, which is a novel that features the possible future extinction of mankind due to a plague, a pestilence, a pandemic, has long been regarded by scholars as a roman à clef, so a novel in which the members of Mary Shelley's circle were disguised as fictional characters. And Mary Shelley somehow encouraged this kind of interpretation, because she wrote in her journal in 1824, in May 1824, she said, and I quote, "Yes, I may well describe that solitary being's feelings, feeling myself as the last relic of a beloved race, my companions extinct before me." So somehow Mary Shelley is encouraging us to see herself as the last man, and the protagonist of the text is the protagonist of the literary time that she lived in. So this correspondence is unquestionable, and so is the historical awareness and criticism displayed by the author. Nonetheless, I argue that the thoroughly pessimistic and disturbing outlook that is commonly attributed to the last man is not the most important part of the novel. It is what I call a pars destruens. So you need to destroy something in order to rebuild something else. So Mary Shelley in this text, which is very sensitive to ecological issues, presents us a destroying part. So she highlights what has to be dismantled in order to rebuild a society which is more sustainable, more aware also of the interconnectedness between all the living creatures, not just man, but also man, animals, and man and nature. So we are all interconnected. So whatever you do to nature eventually will hit you back, because there is this idea of interconnectedness. So this distressing representation of the past, together with the disappointments of her personal life, because these are also mirrored in the events that she writes about in the text, should be perceived, especially by modern readers, not just in themselves, but also as warning signals, as I said, as a series of prompts, which are also in the guise of negative models not to follow, which aim at the construction of a better future. So let's talk about the frame narrative, because The Last Man is a novel within the novel. There is a frame narrative, which is the most important part in actual fact, and then there is the story in itself. And I'll give you a bit of a summary of this text so that you can follow the analysis better, because you might not be thoroughly familiar with the novel. So, the frame narrative is set in Naples, near Naples, where the Cuman Sibyl's cave is. It is December 1888, and the narrator and his or her companion, because we don't know the gender of the narrator and we don't know the gender of the companion of the narrator, find in this cave some leaves, some Sibyllin leaves, which carry some signs, some inscriptions, which they decide to decipher. And by deciphering this text, then they create the narrative, which is the main body of the novel. So the novel is not a description of an apocalyptic future, but the novel is the description, or better, the deciphering of what was included in the Sibyllin leaves. And therefore, it is a prophecy. And this is a very important aspect. So Mary Shelley is not negative about mankind. Mary Shelley doesn't have a negative outlook. Mary Shelley doesn't express or doesn't voice her dejection about the future, but she feels entrusted with the responsibility to send a powerful awakening message to her readers, which is something that we should have listened to. And probably if we had done that, we wouldn't have had to face the pandemic that we faced. Okay, in the main text, There is a story, the story narrated by the last man, whose name is Lionel Verney, and in which probably Mary Shelley projected herself for her biographical reasons. She was alone. She had been left alone by Percy Shelley, who had died, by Lord Byron, who had died, and therefore she felt the last man. So this is a three-decker book. It's a very important, massive novel, which focuses on the description of the main characters and the way their personal stories somehow entwine at the time of the abdication of the King of England in 2073. There is a philanthropist prince who is Adrian, who is Percy Shelley. Also physically, the description that we are given is the description of Percy Shelley, who befriends the narrator, who is the uncultivated man Lionel Verney, Mary Shelley herself. And through the acquaintance with Adrian, Lionel Verney becomes more conversant with literature, with philosophy, with the arts. And there is another friend of theirs who is Lord Raymond, who is actually Lord Byron, who becomes Lord Protector and decides to fight in Greece against the Turks. So you can see that the story of Lord Byron is perfectly mirrored in the text. But the important element is that via this war against the Turks, the pandemic spreads. So somehow Mary Shelley is connecting the pandemic with the idea of war and the idea of conquest. So she's condemning this idea of overpowering population, this idea of conquering, this idea of creating a domination over a supposedly subaltern culture. So through the Orient, the so-called Orient, the pestilence spreads from Asia to Europe and to England. Lord Raymond dies, and people begin to die. They begin to be decimated, and they start this kind of exodus, this kind of pilgrimage in search of a better place where to live. They go to France, they go to Switzerland, and they end up in Italy. Fewer and fewer of them because they die along the road. And they hope to survive in a milder climate, because this was the dream that all the romantics had, the idea that in Italy, with a milder climate, all the diseases could be healed, could be cured, but it was not like that, even in this case. So at the end of the novel, in 2100, Lionel Verney remains the last man alive on Earth. And what we read is actually the story that he wrote, the diary of his progressive loneliness and solitude. And after a prolonged residence in Rome, he abandons his diary and he decides to sail across the Mediterranean looking for other survivors. So apparently this is a story of dejection, but never forget that this is a prophecy and that the story itself begins in 1818. So Mary Shelley is giving us a projection of what may happen in the future. So let's talk about the pars denstrens, so the destroying part, the failure, the part of the failure described by Mary Shelley in this text. So she criticizes, first of all, William Godwin. William Godwin was convinced that man was destined to the most incredible things, the most incredible progress, that mankind would progress and would be perfectible, and we had unlimited powers. Our mind was or ever expanding once freed from the institutional restrictions that were typical also of that period. He also believed that if man had developed his mind in a proper way, then he or she would have defeated all the diseases. And this is not like that in the text. So Mary Shelley is saying you cannot rely only on human powers. You cannot be so self centered, because if you are self centered, you are dooming the whole of mankind to destruction. So, this is the first thing that Mary Shelley somehow undermines. She undermines also religion, because people may think, okay, you cannot rely on man's intellect only, so let's rely on God. But in The Last Man, not even religion can bring relief to mankind. So all the characters never pray. They don't offer any prayer to a God that is distant. And the only preacher that is featured in the story is a man who is a self-erected prophet and is the head of a fanatical sect entitled The Elect. And this sect is full of imposters. And this is actually what happened, at least in Italy, during the pandemic. During the pandemic, there was a multiplication of pseudo-religious beliefs and men that took advantage of people's vulnerability and fragility in the circumstances that we all faced in order to garner consent, in order to become more powerful. And this is what Mary Shelley is criticizing. So she is saying, never rely on men only, never rely on God only. I mean, there should be an interaction of the things, but first of all and most of all, there should be respect for nature and respect for everything that surrounds us. In this text, Mary Shelley also describes the failure of the romantic idea of art. For example, at the beginning of the novel, Adrian contemplates the English countryside and he appreciates the landscape and say, oh, this is beautiful. We are the most enthusiastic and the happiest inhabitants of the planet. We enjoy nature. But in truth, this is highly ironic, because later on in the novel, the rhetorical question that Adrian had posed, and I will read you the rhetorical question, which is, if mere existence and not happiness had been the final end of our being, what need of the profuse luxuries which we enjoy? So Adrian thinks that everything has been created in order to make mankind enjoy nature. So man is the center of the natural world, and the natural world has been created just for his pleasure. But this is not like that, because the pestilence in The Last Man and the pandemic we all went through taught us an important lesson, that nature should not serve the man, and nature exists regardless of mankind. The pestilence in The Last Man, which would soon doom the future of mankind to misery and death, affects only men. Sparing plants, sparing animals, which continue to thrive and prosper. Exactly what happened to us as well. And besides, the epidemic becomes more virulent in spring, which is a season that is commonly associated, at least in the Western world, with rebirth. Spring is connected with Easter, with the Catholic religion, with all the Christians' variants of faith, according to which basically Christ died and resurrected. So spring for us is resurrection, but in this case, in the case of Last Man, spring once again has nothing to do with man. Spring exists and man dies. So in this text, there are also references to other poets who celebrated the strength of man, the power of man over nature. For example, Wordsworth. I'm sure you're all familiar with a sonnet that he composed in 1802 entitled Upon Westminster Bridge. In Upon Westminster Bridge, Wordsworth, who is normally associated with nature and the poet of nature, in actual fact, he celebrates the bridge constructed, built by men over nature. So it is a celebration of men over the natural world. And Wordsworth spoke about London's smokeless air. He spoke about the mighty heart of London. He spoke about the docks of London, the domes, the towers, the power of this incredible city that was expanding all over the place. And in Mary Shelley's The Last Man, this doesn't exist, because in some passages of this text, she describes even the factories, the very factories that were celebrated by Wordsworth, the very towers, the very bridges that were celebrated by Wordsworth, are described as crumbling to dust, as damaged, because there is nobody that is going to mend them if there is a problem, and nature takes preeminence over everything that man has built. So Mary Shelley is very careful in highlighting what we may term the failure of ethnocentrism. So at the very beginning of the novel, for example, England is described as a vast and well-manned ship, which musters the winds and rides proudly over the waves. So the image of England as a ship is the image of a conquering nation. There is a frequent use of colonial imagery in the text, which is a signal, an unmistakable signal of the imperialistic ambitions and the strong feelings of self-praise that some of the characters and some of the British of Mary Shelley's times had. So, for example, Lord Raymond, who is actually Lord Byron, is fictional alter ego, actually claims that when he goes to Greece to fight against the Turks, he doesn't want to free Greece. He wants to have an outpost from where to subdue all Asia. So, in a way, Mary Shelley connects the colonialistic and imperialistic ambitions of England to the spreading of the disease. So somehow one image and the other overlap. Colonialism is disease. Colonialism brings disease because in itself it is something sick. Because instead of creating channels of communication between peoples, it destroy one to have another prevail over. So this is something that Mary Shelley criticized very strongly. So the so-called Orient is the source of the plague, which spreads from the shores of Nile and affects the East and then arrives to England in a very interesting way via America. So the plague arrives to England through an American ship. So the former colonial empire, the former British colonial empire, strikes the heart of the empire back. And this is something that Mary Shelley was perfectly aware of. It's not a coincidence. So the former colony strikes the heart of the empire and exposes its limits. So at the end of the novel, we have somehow a humorous reverse of the initial image. So in the opening sequence, we had England as a powerful ship, and in the closing scene of the novel, we have an ironic counterpart. We have the last man who is about to sail off on his little dinghy, on his little boat. And this time the traveler is not heading towards glory, towards conquest, adventure, ambition. It's towards the unknown and probably death. So far we have seen the part destruence. Mary Shelley has dismantled ethnocentrism and has shown that if we continue to behave with nature, with other non-human animals, if we, continue to senselessly exploit what we have around us, pestilence and death is our future. But there is also a power's constraints, because as I told you from the very beginning of my talk, this is not a catastrophic and apocalyptic novel. It's only a prophecy. It's a prophecy of the Cumean Sibyl, or better still, of what the decipherer understood of the leaves, putting together all the scattered and unconnected fragments, and some of them were still unintelligible. So this could be also an interpretation. So we are not sure that the future is going to be actually as such. So there is an ominous epigraph of the text from Paradise Lost again, and I read you the epigraph. Let no man seek henceforth to be foretold what shall befall him or his children. So these are the words that Adam utters after the archangel Michael shows him a vision of the deluge. This is balanced by the reassuring knowledge that in this case there is no Archangel Michael involved. There is, no actual fact, and what Mary Shelley is describing may not turn out to be like that. So she's saying, beware, look, this is a possible future, and do your best to avoid this possible future. So Mary Shelley seems to suggest that, even if if we concentrate too much on ourselves, on our potential, and we lose the broader picture, that is the impact that we have on the planet, on the other living creatures. Mary Shelley is saying, if we do that, we are doomed to failure. And I would like to conclude my talk by telling you my personal experience as a teacher. I had taught The Last Man many years ago, something like 15, 20 years ago. But during the pandemic, I decided to read with my students The Last Man again and again and again. So for 2 years, for the two most crucial and gloomy years of pandemic, I read with them The Last Man. And I must tell you that the response that I had was incredible. If compared also to the reaction that I had had from the students to whom I had taught the book many, many years before. So, whereas the first ones had been not so interested in the text, they found it something remote, not connected with their own experience. The students have had recently, I found this text incredibly important for their own lives. And some of the students highlighted the ecological concerns that Mary Shelley had and somehow share them. They understood the message, the powerful message that Mary Shelley wanted to convey to her readership. And they decided also to spread the text instead of spreading the pandemic. So to counter the spreading of the pandemic by spreading this text. Some of my students told me that they had bought the book and given the book to their friends, to their family, because it somehow teaches us how not to behave if we want to survive. And I would like really to conclude with, the role of literature by understanding and by underlining the role of literature. The role of literature is this: literature is not just entertainment. Literature is what enables us to live our life with awareness and with a sense of responsibility that otherwise we would not have to such an extent. I'm here for you if you have questions, and thank you very much for your attention. I think we have something like 15 minutes for questions.
Dear participants, we are waiting for the questions from your side. Please do.
Even if you have curiosities or something that you would like me to expand on.
Ma'am, I just request you to suggest some few texts which can also be associated with your this lecture that you have delivered today, so that our researchers could go through it and to find out some more reliability into the literature with awareness and anything else. If you have, please, ma'am.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes, I will. If you want, I will send you a list. Okay, maybe. Wait a second. I can also suggest talking about literature and ecology and awareness. If you give me a second, while maybe other people are
Yeah, ma'am.
thinking
Please
questions,
take your time.
I can give you also a hint. There is a book by an Indian writer that I found particularly relevant in this respect. Okay, just a second. I'm trying to find it in my files. Okay. Okay, this text is entitled The Mad Woman of Jogar, and it's by Soheila Abdullali. And this is another interesting text which explores our interconnectedness with the animal world, and how, for example, we undermine our own lives by destroying the planet. There is no pestilence involved in this text, but there is a clear hint to deforestation, to the changes that we impose on the landscape, which create huge problem to the survival of mankind. For example, talking about the present situation in Italy, we have had floods like we have never had before, because of the changes that we imposed on the landscape, the dams we built, the rivers that were, that were diverted. So, literature can really teach us how to live more sensibly our life, how to approach nature in a more respectful ways. Not that we need literature. If we were uh, intelligent, I would say, enough as to read the signals that nature herself gives us, probably we would not need literature. But literature is very important in this respect, because somehow it does the job for us. It collects all the hints, it collects all the information, puts them together, creates cautionary tales, or even apocalyptic tales that we can strongly relate to and from which we can really learn. And this is something very important. And the role of teachers in selecting books is also pivotal, because we have to think while we select books for our curricula. We have to think of what can nourish the mind of our students, what can enable them to be more careful and sensitive citizens of the world. Because we should always remember that we are all a huge human family that peoples this planet. We are not islands, but we are all a family.
Sure, ma'am. In this way, we can connect literature with that of the eco-critical aspects, and in this way, we can control the degradation of our environment and all the pandemics that is also the caused by this type of activities which has been done by the human beings. Ma'am, we have one more questions that is being highlighted by some of the
Yes.
participant, and we need your expert comment.
Okay. Can we have a present day text while we select a particular topic that can we relate to mental colonization to pandemic? Hmm. Okay. Present day text. Okay. Not to pandemic, but to other conditions of vulnerability that we are all experiencing, because the pandemic is just one facet of the big core issue of vulnerability that we all have to grapple with. Okay, on the one hand, there is the pandemic. On the other hand, there are also the refugee crisis that can be also connected with pandemics, because the big movements, human movements, are not just connected with the economy. There are some people who are fleeing climate conditions that are unbearable. Think, for example, people in Africa. And there are a lot of refugee novels also connected with climate problems that I can recommend to you. I can recommend one writer of Indian origin whose name is Sanjeev Sahota. Sanjeev Sahota has written a powerful novel entitled The Year of the Runaways. And The Year of the Runaways talks about this group of refugees coming from all over the place that gather in England, try to make a better living in England, only to be spread again to other corners of the world. Because what he is describing in this text is the fact that humanity is adrift, and we are moving constantly, and this constant motion is no longer like the motion in the past. In the past, when people migrated, they stayed in one place for good. Whereas now, people move from one place to the next, to the next, to the next, because of wars, because of pandemics, because of climate problems. And we are constantly drifting. And this leads to the necessity even to reinterpret the idea of home. So home is no longer connected to a place. Home becomes an attitude that we have to develop in the place where we temporarily reside. So we have to create a home wherever we are. And this, if we adopt this attitude, this will also dismantle the idea of colonialism and imperialism, because if we create a home everywhere we go, that means that there is no binary. There is no home and hostile environment. Everything can be turned into a home, and we can spread this positive attitude also to, the idea that the other is no longer the other, but is a member of our wide and big and enormous and globe straddling human family.
Thank you, ma'am. I think there are no questions by the participants. So, as this session heads towards its culmination, I, Dr. Arina, extend gratitude for today's speaker, Professor Elisabetta Marino, Department of English Literature, University of Rome, to Vergata. Ma'am, your lecture on today's topic, literary pandemic, what we can learn from them, has indeed been an enlightening one. Dear Professor, I would like to congratulate and thank on the behalf of the Department of Languages, Integral University, for sharing your knowledge with us and for inspiring young minds with such insightful knowledge. Ma'am, you
Um,
have opened the door. Yes, ma'am.
no, I'm delighted. I was just very appreciative of your
Ma'am, we are
words.
really indebted to you. Ma'am, you have opened a corridor of knowledge that will surely be traversed by our participations and by our participants in the future. Your interpretation of the novel The Last Man by Mary Shelley and its correlation with literary pandemics is really mind blowing. It represents a very powerful message for the future. Thank you, ma'am, for your insightful lecture. We are really indebted to you and your humble cooperation with our department, which we are focusing on in the future also. I would also
Thank
like to express gratitude to Honorable Chancellor Professor Syed Wasim Akhtar sir for providing us with this rostrum for achieving academic excellence. My sincere appreciation for the effort of Pro Chancellor Dr. Syed Nadeem Akhtar sir and Vice Chancellor Professor Javed Masarat sir for initiating the online international faculty development program for the updation of knowledge and understanding of literature. I wish to extend my gratitude to Human Resource Development HRDC Integral University for providing a platform for this program. I also thank Dr. H.M. Arif Nadvi, Head Department of Languages, for encouraging and supporting us in organizing such an interesting sessions. I extend my thanks to Vanya Srivastav for successful coordination and organization of this faculty development program. Dear Professor Elisabetta Marino, we hope that you will bestow us upon our teachers and researchers the treasure of your knowledge in future as well. In the end,
I'm very happy to be with you. And if you have any other question, or if you want to connect, or if you want to join forces in a project, please Google me, find my email address, which is very easy, marino at lettere.unidom2.it, and I will be extremely happy to interact with you.
very sure, ma'am. Very soon we are going to involve with some other assignment with you, and we would mail you for that particular one. Very soon we would intimate with you. Thank you, ma'am. In the
Thank
end,
you.
I would like to thank. In the end, I would like to thank the entire teaching fraternity of the Department of Languages, the supporting staff, the logistic help, and all those who have patiently attended this session. Your presence is highly appreciated. All of us have worked beyond our comfort zones to expand the contour of knowledge by organizing this international faculty development program. Finally, I convey special thanks to all the participants who have embellished this event with their valuable participation. Dear participant, there is one announcement for you all that we started to travel on the second week of this program. So now you will be added to our learning management system. ID would be provided to you to log in through the Integral Learning Initiative ILI portal for the assignment to be completed till the end of this program. Thank you, everyone. Hope you all have a wonderful days ahead. Thank you very much.
Bye bye.
Thank you, ma'am. Bye bye.